Good afternoon, everyone. This is Michael Marks, co-founder of SedonaOffice, and I want to thank you for joining our webinar today. Today's webinar is on SedonaSync, and we're going to look at some of the basics of it and try to answer one of the big questions, exactly what is SedonaSync. And to help me do that, we have two presenters. We have Bridget Perea, who's with SedonaOffice, and we also have Craig Vivier with VineyardSoft Software, who is the main manufacturers of the product, and they will be doing the presentation today. If you have any questions, please record those, and we will get those. We'll answer those questions at the conclusion of the presentation. And so fill out any questions you do have. And at this point, I am going to turn the presentation over to Bridget, who is going to begin for today. So Bridget, it's all yours.
Hi. What we want to start off with is actually talking about what are some things that people are currently doing with SedonaSync, just to get your mind in that in the right frame of mind, so that you can start thinking about what are your possibilities. And as we go through the rest of the webinar, you can keep these ideas in the back of your mind, as well as start thinking of other things that you might want to be doing yourself with SedonaSync. So the first thing that I've seen people asking about and wanting to do is notifying their customers when there's a new invoice added to their account. Another thing people want to know is when sending out a notice to a customer when they have a new service ticket created. You can also, besides the service ticket creation, you can send out a notice to people about a new appointment when it's added to their tickets. You could send out a 24 or a 48-hour reminder notice to people prior to the appointment coming up. We've also seen people notifying their customers when a technician has been dispatched for that appointment, letting them know who is on their way to see them. We can also, instead of just talking about notifying the customer on the ticket, you can also send a notice to your technician telling them, here's your next day's appointment, so they have a heads up as to what their schedule is. You could also send out a notice to people, to the technician specifically, when they have an appointment that is scheduled for more than 2 hours ago, but they haven't been dispatched to that appointment yet. So as a reminder, here's something that's in your queue that you haven't done yet. I've also had a customer ask about wanting to send a notice to a technician when they have an appointment that hasn't been resolved within the past 24 hours. And they were sending the technician a notice of, here's all your appointments that are more than 24 hours ago that you haven't resolved. And then at the end of that, or in relation to that one, they send out a notice to the project manager after a week if the technician has any appointments on their job when that hasn't been resolved yet, so that the project manager can also keep track of that if they haven't resolved it after a week. Speaking of jobs, I've had someone ask to set up an event where they can notify any of the employees in their database of a list of jobs where they have permissions to approve the current task. And that event is sent out once a day before the day starts, saying, here's the jobs you can approve, or where you can approve the next task. Another one is, we sent out a notice for project managers associated with a job when there's a purchase order received for that job, letting them know parts are in, you can now proceed. We've also had one particular customer, two of them have mentioned it, where they want to send out a notice to their technicians who are service techs as well as installers, and send out one email combining both their service tickets for the next day as well as their jobs and their miscellaneous appointments all in one email, instead of having to do jobs separate from service tickets, separate from any of their miscellaneous appointments. So now that you have some ideas of what other people are doing, I'm going to hand presentation over to Craig, and he can show you actually how you set up some different types of events within SedonaSync. Craig, we should be showing your screen now.
We are indeed. Okay, and I am going to ask, because I am showing my screen now, at least according to the go-to menu, you should be seeing a screen referred to as the SedonaSync Event Manager Navigator. If you are not, please type into the chat box within your go-to menu so that Michael and or Bridget can see that, and if we need to do a refresh, we will. So if we don't hear back from you, we'll just assume that everyone can see the screen, and we'll just continue on. So again, thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Michael, for inviting us to be part of this. We feel this is a vital part of getting people used to and familiar with the sort of underworkings of the SedonaSync application. So going back to what Michael mentioned earlier at the start, let's define what SedonaSync is. SedonaSync is often categorized as what's called a business activity monitoring solution. And the purpose of a business activity monitoring, or a BAM solution, if you will, to use the three-letter acronym that we often overuse, is to monitor and identify those conditions of data that reside within your underlying SedonaOffice application database that are time-sensitive, that are critical to your organization, looking for those conditions, looking for those business issues that need or warrant your attention. And as a result of SedonaSync being able to identify this, being able to perform any number of actions, automatically send out email alert notifications, automatically distribute web dashboards, send out most notifications through instant messenger, all these other delivery mechanisms. So in a sense, and its most fundamental description, it is a monitoring and response engine. You tell SedonaSync what condition or set of conditions you wish to monitor. You then subsequently tell you how you want it to respond once those conditions have been identified within SedonaOffice, and then you tell SedonaSync how to respond to those, sending out emails, etc. So it's a very, very powerful tool, because now what you're doing is you're taking all that raw data from within your underlying SedonaOffice database, and you're turning it into meaningful information that can be delivered out to your customers, your service reps, your salespeople, prospects, anything, okay, internally, and you're giving them information that ultimately will help them make decisions faster, that really ultimately have a positive impact on your organization, both financially and operationally. So that sort of definition aside, I want to get into kind of what is it that SedonaSync does. Well, as a business activity monitoring, it has the ability to monitor any number or set of conditions within your underlying SedonaOffice database. Therefore, and even Bridget went through a very partial list of some of the things that we see customers using SedonaSync for, it's virtually limitless. The number and types of conditions that you want SedonaSync to monitor and respond to are unlimited. It's really up to how creative you want to be, the kinds of things that are important to you, etc. So, apologize for this pop-up. Now, one of the things I'll mention is when you're designing an event, and I will describe or define an event as a business scenario or a business condition. Now, I'm going to show you from this, we're looking at what's called the Navigator view. When you're doing your initial setup of SedonaSync, what you need to do first is decide what are those conditions that I wish to monitor, okay? What are the events, as we like to call them? Let's just take an example right here. You'll notice that I've got several branches that are associated with the SedonaOffice application. I've got one related to AR conditions. I've got a separate branch related to invoices. Another related to, I'm guessing this is order entry. I've got service. So I've got all these different branches that help me sort of segregate the different types of conditions. So it's easy for me to navigate around to sort of identify those ones that I want to enable, the ones I want to activate, and any I might want to modify. So let's take an example, and I'm going to open up one event right now that we're going to look at, okay? When I open up an event, you'll see a partial list of some of the events that have already been designed, okay? They are covering everything from ACH payments to customers with new invoices, payments received, etc. So in this particular event, if you will, or condition or set of conditions, we've got a number of events that SedonaSync is set up to monitor. Now, what I want to point out here is that for every event, okay, there are up to 5 components that make up that event. And what I want to spend time doing today is discussing what's under the hood of that event. What is the engine driving the event that we want SedonaSync to monitor? So when I open up an individual event, in this case, this is all related to AR, so we're looking at any new invoices, customer invoices for today. You'll notice that I've got 4 of those 5 components that I referred to earlier. The top button is the schedule. How often do I want SedonaSync to look for these conditions within my underlying SedonaOffice database? Now, to further describe SedonaSync, it's often called a lights-out application. That is, you tell SedonaSync what applications you want it to monitor, you tell SedonaSync what conditions to look for, and subsequently how to respond to those conditions once they've been identified and triggered, but you now want to tell it what to do. The idea behind this is set it up and forget it. So it's a lights-out application. It's going to run 24/7, doing the work that you need it to do. So oftentimes it's referred to as sort of your invisible assistant, your extra employee, you know, my smoke detector for my business. We've had a lot of customers refer to it as different, sort of different nicknames, if you will. But what I want to focus on today are the 3 different ways in which SedonaSync retrieves information from your underlying SedonaOffice database. And that second piece is the real critical part. That is what we call the underlying query. The other 2 here listed are the deliverables, meaning what's going to happen when this particular event, when a new invoice is identified, what's going to happen? Is an email going to be sent out? Am I sending out a fax? Am I sending out an instant message? Am I doing any number of types of deliverables? So those can be as numerous or as few as you want. Subscribers are basically defined as your recipients. Who do I want to send this to? And in what delivery mechanism do I want to use to send that to the person? Some people prefer email, others want text messages, etc. So you get to choose what delivery mechanism. But today we're really going to focus most of our attention on this piece here, this little underlying query, because that again is the engine under the hood of an event within SedonaSync. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at and just to go back a step, there are 3 different types of queries, if you will, that SedonaSync has the ability to monitor and respond to. The first of which is referred to as a record-level query. And to simply define that, really the best way is to look at, I want to find out a specific set of matching records within my SedonaOffice database. For instance, I might want to look at any new invoice that's been captured today or within the past 5 minutes or the past 1 minute, etc. I might want to look at, credit cards, customers' credit cards that are expiring. Okay, I might want to also look at things like AR receivables that are coming up for payment. Okay, I don't want them to go overdue. Those would all be record-level queries. You tell SedonaSync which conditions to look for, which database data elements to look for within SedonaOffice. It finds matching records. It generates or triggers the event. It sends out the emails, etc., etc. So the first one I want to show you is this customer new invoice. I think it's probably a good place to start. So when I open up this one event, you'll see the different components that we referred to earlier. And now, one of the things I like about SedonaSync, one of the many things, is its ability to be used by the folks like me that are not technical. So one of the great parts is you don't need an engineering background. You don't need to know SQL. You don't need to be a programmer. All you really need to know is, or have a thorough understanding as to the underlying database schema of SedonaOffice, meaning you just need to know what database tables store which data within SedonaOffice. And if you've got a pretty good feel for that, you can, in fact, design a lot of your own queries and events on your own. Obviously, the folks at SedonaOffice are very good about providing that information to their customers, so this is certainly something that you'll work towards going forward. But now that I've got to identify my triggering mechanism, I need to create this underlying query. So by simply connecting SedonaSync to the SedonaOffice application database, I now have a view into all of my database tables that make up SedonaOffice. Okay? So in this particular case, I'm just using 3 tables. I've got my customer, AR customer, I've got my bill to table, and I've got an invoice table. And I can actually select from any number of tables. Again, this gives you the ability to create as many different types and kinds of events that you desire and that your business needs. Within this query design wizard that we're looking at, we also have a linking wizard, so you can automatically join or link those tables. Okay, so we make it easy for you to be able to do this, again, provided you've got some understanding as to the underlying database schema. Now, once I've selected my tables, I'm now going to be displayed with all the different database fields that are contained within those 3 tables that we just looked at. So it's going to include all the different data values or data fields that are in my AR customer table, and I think there was a bill to or a bill, AR customer bill station, and I think the final one was the invoice. So I can now simply select, pick, and choose those columns, those data fields. And the reason for this is you want SedonaSync to be able to retrieve the information that's important to you that you want to embed in the outgoing email message or dashboard or instant message or tweet or however you want to deliver that. You want to select those columns of data that you might want to make available in your outgoing notification. So you'll see here that we've got the customer name we want to include in our outgoing email, the customer number, their email address, their physical address, etc. So we've got a lot of fields that we're selecting here, but we don't need to use all these. All of these are being pulled from this upper grid that you'll notice up above. So now that I've selected the tables or columns that I want to be available in my outgoing notification message, I can sort them. So I might want to sort by the customer number and then the invoice number so that they're going to be sorted in ascending or descending order, alphabetically or numerically. And now we get into, we get into what's called the filter. This is truly the triggering mechanism. This is what helps you identify what conditions have to be met or not met, as the case may be, in order for the event to trigger. Because this is what's going to find those matching records that we talked about that meet certain criteria. Now, the 3 filters that we're using in this record level query are, we're looking at for any invoice with an invoice issue date that's greater than or equal to today. So anything that's being placed within SedonaOffice today, I need to make sure we're retrieving that as part of our event. The second is, we want this invoice complete to have an equal value of Y. Again, this goes back to sort of understanding the underlying database schema. And then we're looking for a specific invoice type. In this particular one, you don't have to, but we're using 3. And this one's using a compare value, so it's looking for an invoice type of JSCO, okay, where the value is C. You can have as few or as many filters as you want. You can get very, very fancy with these filters and do different date calculations or date advanced calculations, etc. So this is fairly straightforward. So when I select this, okay, this is now going to look for any records that meet these conditions criteria, and now it's going to trigger the event, which will subsequently send out the email or whatever delivery mechanism you're sending out to those folks. Okay? Now, I would ordinarily show you the preview button. I'm going to show you this because, and the reason I show this is exactly what you do not need to know to get started with SedonaSync. What we've done in walking left to right by selecting the tables and the columns and the filter is we've created a fairly complicated, or in my opinion, a complex SQL statement. I would not have any idea how to do this. I have no desire to do this. I don't consider myself technical, but I do know, working with different applications, how their databases work, etc. So the only reason I'm showing this is because this will give you a headache if you look at it for too long, is just the thing that you don't really need to know. Okay, there are some technical folks there that know that. Good for them. Okay, I can even preview my query. So if I want to find out that my query, 1, works, and 2, it's retrieving the information I want it to, I can preview it. Now, we don't have any matching records in this particular case because we have a filter that's looking at anything that's greater than or equal to today's date. Okay, I'm running off a very old demo database, so I'm just going to change that filter just so I can display what a preview might look like. So we do have a customer in here, okay, NA, their customer number, their email, etc. So at one point or another, there was a customer who placed an order and the invoice was processed through SedonaOffice, and we captured the record. So if, in fact, this customer had come in and this was placed today, that would be the result. That customer would then be sent an email with the invoice, etc. So that is a record level query. Again, you can get pretty sophisticated. They're fairly straightforward. It's a really good place to start. The second type of query that I want to talk about is what we call a field value change. A lot of organizations want to, what's the old Mark Twain line that goes something to the effect that put your eggs in one basket and watch that basket carefully, and I'm paraphrasing here. A lot of organizations today, and even in the past, want to keep an eye on the shop. They want to know when things are happening, when things aren't happening. One of the other types of queries that SedonaSync supports is something that we refer to as a field value change query, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a different branch from SedonaSync into my order entry branch. And these are all just little sub-branches, if you will, that are looking at different parts of the SedonaOffice application. So when I open up my SedonaOffice branch, I now have a bunch of other events that are associated with my order entry component. Okay, we just have a few here. But we're going to look at this one in particular because what I want to do is I want to have SedonaSync monitor when someone makes a change to a specific field or maybe even a series of fields within my SedonaOffice database. And where we see that really come into play a lot is when a customer has been put on credit hold or taken off credit hold, when a customer's credit status has changed, when a discount has been applied where maybe that has exceeded the normally acceptable level, etc. So anytime a field value changes with SedonaOffice, I want to be notified of this. So this would be a second type of a query, if you will. And again, this particular one, I apologize for that. I'm going to do that. This particular event is looking at a job status where the internal, okay, has changed to close. So we're looking at a field value change for a job that's changed from a status as opened or whatever other criteria it was or parameter to closed. So when I open up this event, I'm going to again see my different components that make up the event, the schedule, how often do I want to look at this, etc. Okay, the underlying query, the deliverables, and then in this case the subscribers. And I will actually show you how this works within an event as well. So in this particular case, we have the query, okay, just like we looked at before. And this is a fairly straightforward one as well. However, it's using a bunch of different tables, okay. It's looking at the AR branch, the AR customer. It's looking at OE job, job status, because in order for this event to run, we need to have and retrieve data from a bunch of different database tables within SedonaOffice. But again, they can be as few or as many as you need them to be, depending on what you want to retrieve and how they are linked together. And again, we've got all of our links through our linking wizard done right here. Okay, I've selected my columns. This is what I want to make available in my outgoing email message, notification, or any other delivery method. Okay, you'll see that we've got the customer name, number, the job ID. So I can now have all this unique information into the body of my email of the event. So every time this event triggers, it's going to pull all that unique information, all that unique data from within SedonaOffice, and it's going to distribute it out via email or whatever delivery tool you choose to the appropriate people. So now I've selected the information I want to display. I'm going to sort this again. My filter, however, a couple of different changes here. We are only looking at two different filters, okay? We're looking at only those job status codes, okay, where they are equal to closed, which is a flag within your SedonaOffice database. Secondly, we're looking at, okay, a date difference filter. So we're essentially looking at a date difference between when the job end date is and the current date, okay? So I want to do a comparison between the job end date and the current date. So that would be what we call a calculated filter, if you will. But again, it helps sort of reduce the number of records, allowing you to sort of laser beam focus only on the data that you want to retrieve within SedonaOffice and pull that into SedonaSync. But in this case, we're looking at 8 days, okay? All right, I believe that's what that particular filter is. You'll notice down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little button that says, if value columns have changed. Now, because I've set up my underlying query, I can now select any field within my query, ranging from here. Okay, I can now within that go to, I also want to know when a certain field value has changed. You'll notice that we chose the OE job description column. I want to know when an employee, when a user of SedonaOffice makes a change to that field. Because now, in addition to triggering the event based on the filter, I also need to know when that job status ID has been changed. Okay, and whether that's related to a change in a credit limit or a credit status or any other field within SedonaOffice, SedonaSync can track it and monitor it. And what it will do is it will actually trigger the event, and it will show you both the previous and the new value of that. So in the event of someone increasing a customer's credit limit, and maybe they were unauthorized to do so, I can see the previous value at $10,000. It's now been bumped up to $20,000. Again, I want to keep my eyes on the prize, keep my eye on the shop. These kinds of conditions, these kind of field value changes are very, very important. Okay, and again, you have the ability to look at the SQL statement. Again, not anything that I'd really be terribly excited with. So I didn't have anything in there, so we're going to go ahead and bounce out. Now, what I want to do before I go into the third type of query that is supported by SedonaSync is I want to show you how that's embedded into the event. So I'm actually going to go back into our AR event that we looked at earlier. I'm going to open up my events branch. You'll see all of the pre-configured events, or some of the pre-configured events that are available. We're going to go back to the new invoice event that we looked at earlier. Now, when I edit that event, once you've built that underlying query, that engine, if you will, you now need to link that to the overarching event. So with the event, I've entitled this just Customer New Invoice. Okay, I have the ability to repeat notifications for triggered items. So if I want to send out a notification repeatedly based on not only new information that SedonaSync's retrieved, but also any other earlier conditions that may have met those criteria, I can have that sent out. That's very important, I think, in a service environment where I have a service ticket that's open at 9 o'clock. Well, at 10 o'clock, the event runs again. Not only do I want to see everything that's been logged between 9 and 10, but anything that was still open the last time the event ran, I want to see those results as well. Because if they're still open, I might want to take action on that by escalating those or by reassigning those, etc. So the repeat notification button is a very powerful little tool that allows you to do that kind of delivery. But when I've set up my event, you'll link that underlying query that we just looked at before. Okay, I think it was just this one here. Okay, you'll link that, and you can use multiple queries, etc. But again, we want to sort of keep this simple right now. So we're just going to link that query to this event. Okay, I will now tab over, because now I'm going to say, when this event runs, I want to, at the very least, I want to send an email notification out. You will obviously enter in what we call the email sending account. So as part of the delivery mechanism, or one of the delivery mechanisms with SedonaSync, you have the ability to send out email notification alerts. Okay, you need to have at least one email sending account to do that, and we offer a number of different options for you to use, whether it's Microsoft Exchange, Outlook, Internet Mail, SMTP. I think even some of the earlier legacy products like Lotus Notes and GroupWise are still supported. And of course, a lot of your other free SMTP services like Gmail, Hotmail, etc. But you have to have at least one email sending account that SedonaSync will look to deliver those messages out. Now, whenever this event runs, it's going to automatically pull from the underlying query that we linked it to and give me access to all those fields that we saw earlier in the underlying query. So now in the invoice, when this event runs, it's going to show the invoice. It's going to say invoice with the invoice number is now available. Okay, we have this configured in an HTML mail template. I personally prefer HTML. It will support just text-based email as well. I like HTML templates simply because it is more visually pleasing. I think you get a nice graph sort of report style delivery in the body of the email, but you can choose plain text as well. And all we're doing is we're simply embedding those fields that we want to make available from this top grid into the body of our email template, so that every time a new invoice has been identified and captured within SedonaOffice, SedonaSync identifies that, automatically sends out the event, takes all the unique information of the invoice, embeds that into the message, the email message text, okay? And now we get to the subscribers, okay? The number of subscribers that you can use in terms of delivery, unlimited. So whether you're sending this just to internal people, whether you're sending this out to customers, vendors, prospects, partners, other suppliers, anyone that you want to send this out to, you've got entire control over that. One of the great things about it is if within SedonaOffice, they do capture the email addresses for different types of contacts. So if I don't want to add the subscriber from some of the default subscriber groups, which are provided with the application, I can simply choose the email tab, okay, that contains the email address for my customer or my salesperson or my service technician. As long as the underlying query that we looked at here is capturing the email address or addresses that you want to include as subscribers, you can make them what we refer to as an advanced or a dynamic subscriber. So in our particular query, we did capture the email address for this customer. Now, when this event runs, it's going to find it's going to find all the invoice data. It's going to import that into the email message. It's going to send it out to these subscribers. I put a few standard ones in here just for the purposes of the training. But the advanced subscribers, in addition to these folks, it's going to now include the customer associated with this invoice, and they will now be emailed a copy of the invoice, or invoice details, if you will, in the body of the email. So I wanted to explain, or at least show to you, how the queries are associated with or linked to the event itself. Okay? And the schedule is simply that. How often do I want SedonaSync to retrieve or to monitor for these kinds of conditions? Do I want it to look for it every minute, every 5 minutes, every day at 5 o'clock, every hour? You have, again, complete control over how frequently you want SedonaSync to look for that condition or that event. Okay, so that is the primary means in which SedonaSync is using to interrogate your underlying SedonaOffice database. Now, the final query or condition is what we refer to as an aggregate query. So looking at record level queries, finding matching results within my underlying database, fine. Looking at field value changes, any change that's been made to a field or set of fields, that's great as well. What if I want to do a more, a record or an event, if you will, that's looking at more arithmetic functions? For instance, let's assume I want to count, okay, the number of service tickets by customer during a given time frame. Or maybe I want to look at the total number of sales by customer, okay? Or I might want to look at, the total number of, leads that have come in or anything like that. I want to look at sort of a grouping of records. So the difference between this and a record level is we're now grouping records across different database tables within SedonaOffice, and we're pulling out intelligence information. So it's kind of a business intelligence capability. And what I'm going to do is go into one of the events that we have set up here that's looking at service tickets. So if I go into my SedonaOffice service module, you'll notice I've got a bunch of events related, not a bunch, we've got a few events related to service tickets, okay? So I'm now looking at, again, just to sort of segregate these so that they make sense and are easier to read, we've got our AR, we've got invoices, OE, service, okay, et cetera. So now I've opened up my service branch within SedonaSync, and you'll notice that we've already got 4 events already configured, okay? Now I'm going to look at an aggregate. I want to look at the total number of tickets by customer that have of a certain number of tickets, okay, that have come in within X number of days. Okay, so we're kind of doing a couple of different sort of calculations here. And it's a very easy process to do because when I open up this event, I'm going to look at that underlying query that's part of the event. And when I edit the query, it's going to show me what it's looking for. So just as we looked at with the other queries, with the other events that or the other queries that we looked at earlier, you're going to define the tables or table. Again, you can run queries using just one table, or multiple tables. You saw the one that we had just that had 3 or 4. You saw the other that had more like 6. In this case, all we're doing is we're looking at the AR customer table and the service ticket table, because we want to associate any open service tickets to a specific customer. Okay, again, we can link and join those. All right, now the difference here, okay, is that we are doing 2 things with this particular query. The first thing is we need to go out and count how many service tickets have come in over the past X number of days, okay, whether that's 1 day, 2 days, 8 days, your call. We can make this what we call parameter driven, so you can actually run this query and use this query in multiple events. I might want to have an event that looks at open service tickets by customer, anything over 3 days, and then anything over 5 days and 7 days. Well, instead of creating a separate event for each one of those, we can make the underlying query parameter driven, where you simply hard code that value into the event itself, and I will show you that here in a moment. But the first thing that we're doing with this particular event is we're counting, okay? You'll notice when I drop down that I've got a number of different arithmetic calculations that I can use to calculate or to run against the SedonaOffice database. I can count or total. I can summarize. Okay, so I might want to look at the average number of orders that have come in for a given region, or the average number of times a person has called in or submitted a service ticket request. I can do all these sort of arithmetic calculations. Now, in this particular case, we're doing a count because I want to total up the total number of service tickets by customer. That's the first thing that it's doing. It's then looking for each and every customer name and their associated customer number. And again, I can sort these. So if I want them to display in alphabetical ascending or descending order, okay, based on the number. Okay, so if I base it on number, it's going to probably look at chronological order. If I'm looking and sorting first on customer name, it's probably going to be alphabetically, ascending or descending alphabetically, no, ascending alphabetically. So I can sort these so that's going to, when the list comes out in the email or the outgoing notification, it's going to list in that order. Now, the filter here is important, okay, because what we're doing first is we're looking at, okay, any, and I'm going to just open this up, open service ticket create date, and we're comparing that to today's date. Okay, so that's filter number 1. That's our filtering mechanism number 1. The second, because we are running an aggregate, that is, we're running a count, is we want to look at, I want to count based on the number of service tickets that have come in during that period of time, and I want to show, is that greater than X? And by putting the number in, I can hard code that here to be 5, whatever I want. Again, I'm going to leave that as a parameter because I might want to use this particular query in multiple events to look at different thresholds. I might want to look at 5, I might want to look at 10, 15, etc. Okay, now, again, I'll skip through the SQL, okay, because we've seen what that looks like and how ugly that is. Now, I'm going to put in, this is an older database, so I want to just preview my query to, again, make sure that number 1, it works, and number 2, that it's retrieving the information that we wanted to retrieve, so it's going to be available and as output in my outgoing alert notification. So when this one comes up, I'm going to choose, because we use this as parameter, we have that little question mark there, I'm just going to say 10,000 days. I need a big number here because this is an older database. All right, tickets greater than 1. Okay, again, it's an older database, so I'm just going to put a negative number in here. And what we're going to do, okay, nothing showed up there. So let's go ahead and try it again. Okay, now it's going to ticket counter greater than 1, and nothing showed up again. So anyway, it's not retrieving data. I know that this query works, though. Okay, and the reason I know that is it didn't cough, meaning nothing said, oh, there's an error here. It's just not retrieving any data. But the purpose behind the preview, I find, when designing queries and events is I want to make sure, number 1, that it works, and number 2, that it's retrieving the information from within SedonaOffice that I want it to retrieve. Because now when I link this query to the event, I want to make sure that I've got all my different data values, data columns, fields, etc. available to embed into my outgoing email message or whatever delivery tool I choose to use. So that, folks, in a thumbnail sketch is sort of a fundamentals, if you will, of SedonaSync basic query design. Record level queries, field value change queries, and aggregate queries. Again, you don't need to be a programmer to do this. I encourage you to sort of walk through and kind of work with them. Some of these pre-configured events that are often offered by SedonaOffice are good starting points, and I think that you can learn, because if you don't know the database, this is another good way to use it, is work with some of their existing ones and just run some tests, see what it's retrieving, how can you reuse those, how can you modify those, etc. So I will go ahead at this point, and we will, of course, leave time for the end for specific questions on types of queries, how it's done, how you work with the query design wizard, etc. But we'll certainly leave at least 5 minutes or so towards the end to address any questions you have. I am now going to change the presenter back to Michael. And Michael,
actually,
you should now have control. No, let me make that. No, I think Michael has it now. But you need it, Bridget, correct?
Yes, correct.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So now that Craig's gone an overview of the different types of events that are in SedonaSync that you can create, what I want to do is I want to talk about specifically 2 SedonaSync events that are pre-configured and the steps you need to go through to configure them yourself. And the 2 examples I want to look at, and let me take a step back, is Craig was using the SedonaSync Event Manager Navigator. I'm just using as my user interface the SedonaSync Event Manager, not the Navigator itself. It gives you all of the same information, but it's just a different way of looking at it. So I am going to look at, in AR, under Events, I'm going to talk about the Customer New Payments event and the ACH Payments after 12/31/2011 event. These ones we're going to go into a little bit more information about SedonaSync's business rules so that you can configure these events so that they work for you. I didn't have that message pop up before, but now I'm getting it too. So, apologize for that. So let's first talk about the customer new payments. And I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the event and the query associated with this event. But if we look at the event itself first, this event has repeat notification turned off, so it's only going to notify you once about a particular payment. The next time, even if that payment still meets the criteria of the query, if it's already sent out a notice about that particular payment, it will not send out a notice again. Then if we look at the query associated with this event is the AR, SedonaOffice AR Customer New Payment Query. So let's take a look at that. If we go under SedonaOffice AR, Query Definitions, and go to the Customer New Payment option. In this particular event and in this particular query, we use the following tables: AR customer, customer bill, deposit, deposit batch, deposit check, and payment method. We already have those tables linked together, and we already have some columns specified. We have a unique column identified over in this unique column, and that one's going to be the deposit check ID from the AR deposit check table. This tells SedonaSync this is the column that's unique, and this is the value that you use in your tracking data to see whether or not you've already sent out a notice about this particular one. But that is already configured for you. What I want you to do, though, is when you're looking at the SedonaSync events that are pre-configured, you do want to have a general idea of what the event is doing, how the query is structured, to make sure it's pulling the information that you intend it to pull. So that's why I want to go over the details a little bit of this particular query. On the sorting tab, we don't have it sorted, but on the filters tab, we do tell this particular event and this particular query to only use the primary bill to, and that's where we're pulling its email address from. And we're also telling it where the AR deposit batch deposit ID is greater than 1. When you create your deposit batch, but you haven't yet clicked the deposit button on it, Once it's created, it has deposit ID of 1, but once you actually click that deposit button and it processes the deposit, it then gets an ID. So this is only going to be showing you deposit batches that have been processed and applied to each customer's account. So if we come over here to the Preview tab, we can see that this data actually, this event and query returns data. And if I come through, I'm sorry, I clicked that rather quickly, we have our business name, we have an email address. This is using my sandbox, so some of the data is a little bit older, but that brings up a valid point. We have our check numbers, but if we come to the last column, we actually have the field called deposit date. This is showing us the way the query is structured right now and the way it's installed as part of the pre-configured event packs that are on each of your servers. It doesn't look at the deposit date and have a filter on it to say where it's only within a specific date range. And that's one of the things that you might want to consider adding to this particular event before you turn it on for your customers. Even though it has the tracking record marked as unique and it will not send out a notice again, the first time you run this event, it is going to try to send out a notice to each of these or regarding each of these payments or deposits. So in my sandbox, I also have 3 of them where they're entered in on 5/31/2013. So what I want to do is I want to limit this event to only be showing recent records. So the way you can do that is on the Filters tab. We can add in the field, and if you're not sure what that field name is by looking at the preview, you can come over to the Columns tab and scroll to the end of it, and our last column is AR deposit, deposit date. So if I come over to the Filters tab, I want to look for, and these are all listed alphabetically, scroll down for AR deposit, but I went a little bit too far, the deposit date. So by double-clicking there, it's going to add it to the list of filters below. And I want to tell it to only limit it to deposits made within the past 2 weeks. This way, or even the past 1 week. So the way we can do that is underneath the compare value, we can put in a calculated filter in here. I don't remember the exact syntax all the time for all of these. So a way that you can get it a calculated value in this compare value is to come back to the Columns tab, and we're going to add in a calculated column. And I want to use one of these pre-formatted functions up here at the top, and I'm going to do, I want to see 2 weeks prior to today. So I'm going to take this one called add date add and use the subtract 30 days from today's date. If I double click it, it's going to put it down here. But I want this to read 7 days because I only want to look within the past week. So all I did was I double clicked on the function. It inserted it down here for me. I changed the 30 days to be 7. And now I'm going to copy this, Control-C. I'm going to cancel it because I don't actually want this to be a column in my query. But I'm going to come back over to Filters, and in the compare value, I'm going to get rid of the question mark and paste in the value that we just had. And all I did was Control-V there. If I come back to this one and click the little ellipse button, we can see that it has our function in there where the date, it's date add, date -7. And so it gives us 7 days less than today's date. But I don't want the deposit date to be equal to that. I want it to actually be, the deposit date to be greater than 7 days prior. And since we have a function in here, that isn't really a date, it's a function, so we want to change the type to be literal. That will tell SedonaSync when it's creating the SQL query to treat this text as it is. Don't do any formatting to it itself. So to make sure that I have this query right, I'm going to come over to Preview, and now it's only going to give me those 3 deposit checks that were entered in within the past 7 days, which 7/31 is. So I'm going to save and close this query because now it's only going to give me records within the past week, so that the first time this event runs, it's going to try to send those out, and it's not going to send out records of all deposits for all history of having SedonaOffice running. So let's go back to the event and go into the customer new payments. Double click on that. We already discussed the repeat notifications turned off. We have our query defined and updated. We understand how it works. We're going to come into the email tab. We are going to tell it what our outgoing email account is. If you want to, you can, within our pre-configured events, we have blank spaces entered in for some information for you to fill in, so it's branded towards your company and your specific information. So we did this. We can either leave the message subject to be payments posted notice, and that's what the message subject will be to the customer. You can add in your company name here. I'm just going to add in SedonaOffice, but you would want to put in your information, as well as if you use Sedona Web, you're going to want to enter in on this line where it says to review your account online, please visit our online bill pay app, and you can insert a link to Sedona Web here, as well as your contact information and any logos. After you enter in and enter your email account, that's the outgoing email, make sure the email is formatted with all of your branded information. The next thing you're going to want to do is look at the subscribers. This particular one, on the Advanced Subscriber tab, we have it referencing the email address of the primary bill to. If you have an event that is going to be using a standard subscriber, so someone who's hard-coded in, you always have to add those in. Those will never come over on a pre-configured event because we don't know who your subscribers are. But we do know what field contains the email address of the customer, so those ones will carry forward. The last thing you want to do is add a schedule. And in this particular case, we're going to want to send out a notice once a day. So you can either use a pre-existing event and say daily at 9 a.m. Or if you wanted to do a new schedule, you could say daily at 7 p.m. and it will send out a notice at night. You can say in the frequency, pick daily. You can pick the time of day to run, 7 p.m., and I'm just typing that in. And if you want to include this to run on Saturday and Sunday, you can. You don't have to, but you can include those. So I'm going to save and close the schedule. And now this event is everything is set up for it and ready to run for it sending out to your customers. I highly recommend trying these events out to yourself so that you can make sure the email is formatted in a method that you want. So what you can do is go back to subscribers, remove this one called email from the Advanced Subscriber tab, come over to a standard subscriber, and add yourself in here wherever you're put. And you can save and close this, highlight that particular event, and do schedule this now. That will cause the event to run immediately, and it will send the notice to you so that you can have all the formatting the way you want it before you actually turn this on for your customers. Once you have it the way you want, you can go back in and remove yourself as a subscriber. And I'll actually do it this way, highlight it and do remove subscriber, and come back in and use on our Advanced tab under email, pick our email address field. And then the next time it runs, it's going to look for any new records that were added within the past 7 days and that it hasn't already sent out a notice for. And you'll have already verified that the email is formatted the way that you want it. That took a lot longer than I thought it would to explain all that. The other one, briefly, that I wanted to talk about is the ACH payments. The difference with this one is that it's actually looking at ACH payments that have been posted to a customer's account. And what you're going to want to do is, for this particular event, you're going to probably want to change this so that the date criteria is not 12/31/2011, but you might want to put it so that it's something within the past 7 days or within the past 14 days. I already had on my clipboard that formula that we created in the query before, so I'm just going to copy and paste that in here, but change it to 14 days. And the reason I'm doing that is this particular query looks at ACH transactions that have been posted, but it's using the submitted date of when you submitted the transactions. And that doesn't necessarily get posted the same day that it's been submitted. So you are going to want to keep in mind having a date that's at least a few days past, up, and probably I would recommend 2 weeks ago, just so that if anything takes a while to get approved and posted from ACH, it's been submitted within the past 2 weeks, so you'll catch any stragglers that take 5 or even 10 days to get posted. So the second one I didn't go over in as much detail as I wanted to, but we are running short on time. But that is the main piece of information that you want to know with the ACH one, is that it's looking at the date that it's submitted, and that is not necessarily the date that the ACH transaction has been posted. So you're going to want a little bit of time frame in between the submitted date and how far back that you're actually looking. So that was basically the 2 events that I wanted to cover. I am going to pass the control back over to Michael so that he can go into any questions that people have submitted. Michael, you should have control now.
Okay. Before we go through any questions, I just have a few things I want to show. And this is a good example of how SedonaSync can be used within a process within your business. So remember, SedonaSync is sitting over, just watching over the SedonaOffice database. And here we have a process of service. And I've broken it down very simple. From when we first create a service request from a customer, to processing a service ticket, to creating the email. And where may SedonaSync work within this process? Well, when a service request comes in, you might email the customer when you create an appointment. So any new appointments that you schedule for them could be emailed to them. At the same time, it could be emailed or text messaged straight to the technician, letting them know that a new service appointment has been scheduled for them. You can send email reminders, as Craig and Bridget mentioned. So the night before a scheduled appointment, you send the customer a reminder. You can also set events that look over the inventory. So when you use parts on a service ticket, it can automatically notify a inventory manager for stock replenishment or ordering. When an invoice is created, it can email the invoice to the customer. You could email a follow-up to the customer with a survey. How did we do on this service call? And you can embed a link using any product like GoToMonkey for surveys and do survey links within there. Additional things you could do within there is maybe you want to notify the dispatcher on late dispatches. So if a call is scheduled for 10 a.m. and you set a 60-minute threshold, it's now 11 a.m. and the appointment hasn't been dispatched, let the dispatcher know. Maybe you want to notify a dispatcher when an appointment is over its scheduled time. So you schedule an appointment for 60 minutes, but the technician's now been there for 120 minutes. Well, this is going to mess up your schedule for the rest of the day and potentially have an impact on your next call. So notify the dispatcher when someone's been on site for more time than they were supposed to be there. You can flag customers with high volume or service tickets, as Craig showed you using the threshold counts. So if you wanted to know when a customer has over 5 service calls within a certain period of time, notify management, notify service managers. Maybe you have a problem going on there. Again, you can notify management of missed appointments. Maybe at the end of the day, I want to know every appointment that we didn't get to that was scheduled for today. So these are just some examples of how you can use SedonaSync in your business. This next slide shows you a sample, and as Bridget mentioned, when you purchase SedonaSync, you will receive a series of events and predefined event packs. This is a new event pack that we're just coming out with. There's no graphics in this one yet, but you can add graphics, your logos. This is a new invoice message that was sent to a customer. And this pack actually has invoices for auto-pay customers with credit cards, auto-pay with ACH, self-pay customers. And you notice what we did in this one is we embedded the invoice charges into the email. So the customer doesn't get a PDF. They're going to get the summary of their invoice right within the text message within the email itself. You can also put things in as your remit to address in here. You notice in this one we have a link to log into, and in our case, our Sedona web, so the customer could click on that and pay it online. But you get an idea how you can now configure an email for an event pack for new invoices. So before we get into the questions, and we'll leave just a few minutes after this, I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to remind you we have our next webinar. It's SedonaSync Advanced Event Designs. It's next Wednesday. We're going to go into more in-depth in creating more advanced events. So if you're a designer and you create events, this will be a very good class for you. We also, if you haven't seen the emails, we have created a SedonaSync event sharing community. And if you have any questions on this, please email our support department. But the idea here is we want to share events that are created amongst all of our users. So if you have an event and you need one, you could go to the sharing community and download it and see if it's out there. Hopefully you'll post your events when you create them, but it will just become a nice community for all of our users to share their ideas and events. Additionally, if you need any help creating any events, we do offer services to help you design and create any SedonaSync events you need. If you're going to be in Nashville in week after next, we will be there, and please come by and visit us. We will be more than happy to show you SedonaSync or any of our other add-on modules. Additionally, we have another webinar coming up at the end of this month, and we hope you could join us for that one, and that's on financial statements and key performance indicators. And that's going to be Wednesday, June 26th at 1 o'clock. So let me just go through here and go through any questions that you might have. We do have some questions, and Craig, I'm going to need your help on some of these to answer.
Sure.
Give me 1 second to pull this up. Where did my questions go? There we go. Okay. Someone asked, what is the link to the sharing community? I'm sorry, I don't have that offhand. But if you email our support at SedonaOffice.com, we'll send that out to you. We'll also make sure we get another notice out. And just as an FYI, if you are not on our email list, please go to our website at SedonaOffice.com, and right on the front page is a link to join our email list. And that way you'll make sure to get all of the notices that we have as you know, for any announcements or anything that comes out. Will the advanced class cover the dashboards, what they can do, and how they can be set up. Bridget or Craig, can you answer that question?
I don't think we were planning on covering dashboards in that one.
Yeah,
okay.
I can tell you from experience, we've tried to keep the dashboards as a separate. I think that Bridget, Michael, we should discuss that as maybe yet a third or fourth webinar. We really kind of in the advanced query design get into some more, well, just that, more sort of arithmetic calculation functions, doing sort of operational business light, if you will, type of events. So we don't really have enough time, unfortunately, to cover dashboards. We have done that as a separate webinar, and I would love to work with you, Michael and Bridget, on scheduling that at some point, because we could also cover the graphing and charting and things, other things that will be coming out.
Okay. And I'm going to go to two more questions. If you ask the question and we didn't answer it here, we will go through all the questions and respond back to you. But Craig, this is for you. Is there a reason you didn't use the Add Calculated column to filter under the Filters tab? I believe this is when you were creating yours.
When I was creating mine?
Yeah.
Right, so let me step back. There were a couple of the queries that we looked at, and one of them, and a couple, at least two, were using date diff. So those were actually done. They were already created prior to the webinar, but they were actually done using an advanced calculation, using that advanced calculation wizard, where we would do a date diff to compare two different date values, and I think it was possibly service ticket date or something, and today's date. So that actually was, in fact, created using that advanced calculation designer. I just didn't actually go into it because it was already done.
Okay. And then the last question, I think, Craig, this will be for you too. It says, can I launch a third-party app by sending a parameter from the data to the app command?
Launch a third-party app, so the parameter, so, okay. Michael, might I have you restate that, or just rephrase, not rephrase it, just say it again.
Yeah, I'm just reading it verbatim. So it says, can I launch a third-party app by sending a parameter from the data to the app command?
The answer is yes. Now, there is a module within SedonaSync that we refer to as the actions or the workflow, if you will. And that gives you kind of an API tool set, if you will, which is for doing more advanced workflow scenarios, for being able to move data from SedonaOffice to maybe some other third-party application or some other database. We have what we call an actions workflow module, which gives you these different API tools to work with, one of which is to actually launch an executable. So you might want to actually, kick off an executable to a third-party application, passing any of the data from SedonaOffice through SedonaSync to this application or some other database, et cetera. So the answer is yes. We'd probably want to dig a little bit deeper into how they'd want to do that, but you can do it. You would, of course, require that actions module, however.
Okay.
Well, again, the actions module is not included in your normal license that you already receive.
Right. That's an additional feature that needs to be added. Well, Craig and Bridget, I want to thank you very much for your presentation today. For everybody else who attended, thank you so much. We hope that you found this time and presentation worth your time. Again, if you have any questions, please email us at support@SedonaOffice.com, and we look forward to having you come back next week as we do our next webinar on SedonaSync. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.